Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to what is the highlight of our federal conference, the party business session. Now, we have 3 federal reports to get through and 1 business motion. And because we now know what we didn't know when we planned the agenda, that voting takes some time, we're having to rearrange the agenda slightly, and this has been announced on Conference Daily. So the Federal Appeals Panel report and the appointment of the new members of the Federal Appeals Panel, item F26, we are going to move until after the leader's speech. So we'll come on to that about 3:30. Before then, we'll be dealing with the other 3 items of party business, the Federal Board report, the Campaign for Gender Balance report, and the motion on membership subs. To understand these sessions properly, you will need in front of you a copy of the party's report document. That's available on the party website on the conference papers part. And also a copy of today's Conference Daily, which is also on the website and also on the conference app, which lists the questions that will be put to the various people reporting back. I should note now that there are no questions submitted to the report of the Campaign for Gender Balance. So if we have time, and we should have, we can take some questions off the chat. So if anybody wants to put in any good questions to the Campaign for Gender Balance, you might want to think about those now. But before that, we're going to deal with the report of the Federal Board. So let me introduce Mark Prack, our Federal President and Chair of the Federal Board, to move the report. Mark.
Thank you, Duncan. It's certainly not been the year that either I or any of my colleagues would have anticipated when we took up office on the 1st of January. But one of the most important decisions that we took, and I'm glad that we got it right, was to appoint Dorothy Thornhill and her colleagues to do that independent review of our 2019 general election. And it's a really important report that she and her colleagues have produced, and a really long and challenging but necessary to-do list that she has given us. And it's not only a report that challenges the federal party to up its game and to learn lessons from our mistakes last year, but also her report is a report that is relevant to the whole party. So it's absolutely right that in sessions like this, you hold me and my colleagues to account for how we're doing on implementing those parts of the report that are relevant to us. But what I would also encourage you to think about is how that report applies to every other bit of the party, because whether it's a local party, a party organisation, a regional party, a state party, all other parts of the party can find things in Dorothy's report that are relevant and important that we change and get right in the future. And one of the reasons I emphasise that is because we do have a bit of a culture in this party of loving to come up with long lists of what might go wrong if we do something different. And in particular, it's very noticeable that, for example, in the leadership election, when we came up with a set of plans for doing the hustings, some differently, some more closely mirroring what we've done in the past, the initial feedback was very powerfully that people really wanted regional hustings to be as similar as possible to how they've always been in the past. And some of the new ideas we had around hustings themed around policies, there was again immediate feedback about, all lots of different ways that might go wrong. But once we did it, and we then have been able to begin to see the feedback from people, you know what? The things that we changed the most are the things that people have been most positive about. And we're seeing that again in this conference. Forced on us by circumstances none of us would have wished, but the fact that we've had to do a conference online this autumn has already resulted in the highest attendance at a conference, in the first year of a parliament that any of us can find. Looking back through the records, huge numbers of people voting. Lots of people, for example, I've noticed regularly saying in the chat how they've never been able to come to a conference before. So once again, the lesson there is that when we change and when we get it right, we can be massively more effective and do things better. And that's a spirit we need to carry through, rethinking so much else that we do in the party. For the board, we've obviously been particularly focused on improving how we operate as an organisation, and especially making sure that we have proper decisions and choices in front of us, so that it's not just that you get to go to this important meeting and talk about important sounding issues, but actually you get to make decisions that influence what then happens, because that's what brings real life to our internal democracy. It's not that just we have discussions, but that we make decisions that alter what then happens. Alongside that, there's been a big expansion in our reporting back to members, and I hope many of you have seen that, ahead of and after each board meeting and indeed each steering group meeting. There's a report that goes up on the party website in the ad lib section, and we're making much greater use of email out to party members as well. And I'd really encourage you to have a look at those reports. We're also making sure that a wider range of federal committees are regularly reporting through those channels as well. I'd just like finally to thank particularly three of my colleagues on the board who have stood down this year. Barbara Gibson, who was the chair of the Federal People Development Committee. She stood down over the summer. Ruby Chow, who was a directly elected member of the board, who stood down earlier in the year. And then finally, Kevin Lang, who has stood down as the Scottish rep on the board. Thank you very much to all three of them. And two of those three we don't yet have a successor for, but I'm sure all three of their successors I'll very much look forward to working with over the coming 2.5 years. And just finally, I'd like to pay particular thanks to all the different volunteers and staff that the board interacts with, and especially the two staff at HQ that we work most closely with in terms of Jack and Georgia. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you very much indeed, Mark. So we're now going to move on to the questions that have been submitted to the Federal Board in advance, which you will find in your conference daily on page 3. The first question by Malcolm Bitchell has actually been withdrawn, but I think, Mark, you want to answer it in any case.
Yeah, in case anyone else has seen the question, and I wanted to apologise to Malcolm that there had been a mess up. His kind offer of support hadn't been properly followed up on, but I've spoken to the fundraising team and they have been in touch with Malcolm. But apologies for that, and if anyone else is ever in a similar situation, please don't hesitate to get in touch, because the Legacy Society is a really important part of the party's future. And as I said, apologies, but hopefully we've managed to fix that problem.
Thank you, Mark. So we'll move on to question 2, which was originally submitted by Jenny Rigg, but has been transmitted to Fraser Graham, because Jenny is sitting next to me on the desk as aid of this debate. So, Fraser, would you like to stand by to ask a supplementary question? And Mark, would you like to answer the original question?
Sure. Well, thank you, Jenny and Fraser, for this important question about changing the way we recruit members into the party. And thank you particularly, Jenny, for your persistence on this issue over several conferences. It's a really important one. And earlier this year, the board asked the Party Bodies Review Group to look in more general terms about how we improve the way party bodies work with the party. And I asked them specifically to make sure they look at this recruitment issue. I'm glad to say their draft report recommends going ahead with a pilot to try this out, with a particular focus on using one or more of the party bodies that have a focus on diversity. So I'm very hopeful that, subject obviously to that report being finalised and then being agreed when it comes to the board. But I'm very hopeful that therefore it means the next time you ask this question, Jenny, we'll be able to discuss how that pilot is going. I should just add, in case anyone's wondering why we might go down the route of a pilot, there's quite a lot of complicated back-end system changes we need to make. So I think, assuming, as I very much hope we do, we go ahead with this idea, it will make sense to pilot on a smaller scale first.
Thank you, Mark. So, Fraser, would you like to ask a supplementary question?
Yes. So, Mark, how can we as LGBT plus party members be confident of the party's support on diversity when it's taken years of asking just this question, with changes still not being made, and the new federal steering group has no out LGBT plus representation, as far as I'm aware?
I very much share your frustration about how long it's taken to get this done. And I very much hope that, as I said a moment ago, that when it comes to spring conference, where I'm sure you or Jenny will have a follow-up question on this, that it's progress, that we can report on that. And I think the broader answer to your question is, we can only prove that by making changes like this, that, nice words in answer to a question or in a speech only go so far. And absolutely, I'm determined that this isn't the only change. This isn't the only improvement that we bring in to tackle, as you say, a very important issue.
Thank you, Mark. So we're moving faster than we anticipated, actually, through this session. So if anybody does want to put questions to Mark in his capacity as chair of the Federal Board right away, we should have time to take one or two from the chat. So that will just get you thinking about that. But we have some more questions to get through. So the third one is from Howell Morgan. Mark, would you like to answer that?
So our complaints process is focused on addressing complaints about individual members and their actions rather than creating a list of prescribed organisations. And given the workload we already have on the complaints process, it's not really clear what value would be added by launching a more general review, or more general investigation, I should say, perhaps, into the views and the activities of particular organisations external to the Liberal Democrats. And of course, external organisations would be under no compulsion to cooperate with any investigation. They might change their views or their activities or postures at any point in the future. And of course, they may come and go and, reform under a new name or anything like that. So our approach is very much to focus on dealing with individual complaints as efficiently as we can, and I know there is work to do on improving that, but there doesn't seem to be any benefit to be had from doing a more general investigation about a non-Lib Dem body.
Thank you, Mark. Now, we know that Howell doesn't have a supplementary, so we'll move straight on to questions 4 and 5, which are on similar issues, so Mark's going to answer them together, and then David Hewitt and Telemakos Kosmidis stand by to ask supplementaries.
Yeah, thank you, Duncan. Yes, as both of these questions are on a similar topic, I thought it made sense to answer them together. Our social media channels are really important to us as a party. They're important because that's the modern way that lots of people consume news. And of course, they're important to us because we don't have friendly newspapers that give us the sort of advantage in coverage that it comes to, say, Boris Johnson having when it's the case of the Telegraph. And those social media channels at all levels across the party are really important. And I think we all should be, and certainly I am, very grateful for the huge amounts of volunteer effort that goes into running many local and regional and indeed party body social media channels. For the federal party ones specifically, we've much improved the volume and the quality of the content that goes out on those channels in the last couple of years. And if you compare our output now to the other main parties, in terms of the volume of output, we're actually very comparable to how much other parties put out. So in terms of the particular need to generate content, if anyone is, for example, really good at doing films or animation, those are definitely volunteer skills that will be really valuable. But more generally, there isn't a need for sort of volunteer capacity on that side. That said, where volunteers can be really helpful is in flagging up content that might need moderating. Any of you who have been involved in moderation will know how burdensome that can be. And obviously there are occasions where content might otherwise slip through or not be spotted as quickly as we would like. So if anyone does at any point spot any content on any of the party social media channels, any of the party social media channels run by HQ, I should say, any content on those that you think this does need moderation, it may be somebody's missed it, please do email digitalcomms@libdems.org.uk with the subject line moderation request, the username in question and any screenshots, and that's help that will be really appreciated.
Thank you, Mark. OK, so let's take supplementaries if the questioners would like to ask them. So first of all, we'll go to David Hewitt. David, go ahead. David, I think you might be on mute.
Why aren't we using our national Facebook site as our national focus, our own media channel, showing what Lib Dems achieve in local government and promote all aspects of our policy rather than just minority issues? We should be shouting our local triumphs from the rooftops to encourage support across the country. Why are trolls allowed to roam freely on the Lib Dem pages, making them look more like Mordor than the Shire, when all it takes is a mute button to cut them off from the rest of the world?
Thank you, David. Mark, would you like to answer?
Yeah, so I guess there are two elements to that. One is the choice of what content to prioritise. And our social media channels have been very much focused on trying to maximise recruitment of members and the raising of money. And in that sense, there are two different choices that we have. One is to really focus on bringing in new members and bringing in new money, and the other alternative would be to really focus on, as it were, running it as the equivalent of a focus newsletter, a digital national equivalent of a focus newsletter. Given particularly the huge pressure that coronavirus has put on our party finances, I have to say I do think the emphasis on the former has been the right one to have, but it's definitely a good point that we need to make sure we get that balance right, and that balance should change as we get, for example, closer to big elections. On the point about trolls, they absolutely shouldn't be allowed to roam free. And if you do spot any where you think actually they should have been moderated and they haven't, please do email the examples to the digital comms email address I mentioned in my main answer. That'll be really helpful.
Thank you, Mark. So let's go to our other potential supplementary question from Tilamakos Kosmidis. Tilly, go ahead.
Yeah, am I being heard? Because
yes,
we had the problem with David. Oh, right. The question that I would like to ask is, according to the election review, we need to improve the creativity of our messages, but also we need to build strong digital campaigns. And I was wondering if Mark could inform us regarding what steps the board has taken or will take in the future to address this.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We're currently recruiting for a new post, a Chief Technology Officer, a CTO. Hopefully there will be news on an appointment to that very soon. I know we've had certainly some excellent applicants, and that's a really important part of getting this right, because clearly if you look at, say, the party website, it's got some really good bits and features, but it's probably overall not really where we would want it to be. And that and other elements of technology are part of what we need to fix to be able to be much more effective in all sorts of different digital channels. So the CTO appointment, really important one. We've also ring-fenced some funds for that CTO person to be able to work with. So when they get appointed, I've no doubt they'll come up with various things that we need to fix and change, and there will therefore be the budget for them to be able to do that. So I'm very hopeful there will be lots of progress visible, again, before our next conference. And I'm sure both you and David will, like with Jenny, will have follow-up questions if we've not managed to deliver on that.
Thanks very much, Mark. So we've got about 5 minutes more for questions. So we've had quite a few on the chat. Thank you for that. So we'll see how many we can get through. I'm going to take 2 questions, first of all, Mark, on the new Federal Board Steering Group. So the first one is from David Craddock, and he asks, how is the smaller Federal Board Steering Group working, and what is the plan for it going forwards? And the second one from Andy Hinton is, how geographically diverse is the steering group?
OK, so on the geography one, we have on the steering group, for example, the convener of the Scottish Party and the president of the Welsh Party, so as well as the chair of the English Party, but that in part was quite deliberate to make sure that we've got a range of perspectives. It also includes people like, for example, Lisa Smart, Councillor Lisa Smart, who's a councillor up in northwest England. So there is, I think, pretty good geographic diversity, and one of the things we have done with the steering group, as with the federal board and as I'm glad to say with other federal committees, is because meetings are now all via Zoom, it's a lot easier for people all around the country to take part in those committees. And for example, at the moment we've got a couple of vacancies, one for the People Development Committee, one for the Audit and Scrutiny Committee, and actually I very much hope we get a much more geographically diverse range of applicants now that it's easier to take part in such meetings if you're from outside London. In terms of David's question, we've had 2 meetings of the steering group so far. So I would give it a cautious tick, as it were, in that I think they've been productive and they've been helpful, but obviously it is relatively early days to judge that. One of the things that I think we have got right that seems to be working quite well is that after each steering group, any decisions the steering group makes are reported very promptly to the board, and board members have a call-in process, a bit like might be familiar with in local authorities, so that they can call in a decision, and crucially they can call in a decision before it gets implemented. So that, I hope, is going to be a really useful safeguard. And one of the reasons, I should just say finally, we've deliberately gone for using the existing power in the Constitution to create a body like the steering group, rather than going for a whole set of constitutional changes at this stage, is it will allow us to see what's working, what's not working, and therefore be more flexible. And I've no doubt further down the track there will be, the odds are pretty good, there will be some constitutional changes that would make sense to make. But this way we've got a little bit of flexibility to work out what works best before then possibly embedding some of that in the rules and seeing how other rules might need to sensibly change to adopt to that new way of working.
Thank you, Mark. So I was going to take a question from Nick Barlow, but you've just answered it. So we won't do that. I do notice, incidentally, that the title of the session on your screen in front of you is showing the wrong one. Do let me assure you we are still on the Federal Board report. So I'm going to take a question from Richard Whelan. And Richard asks, what is being done to select more disabled candidates in key seats for the next general election?
Yep. So this is an issue that is, strictly speaking, for the state parties rather than the federal party, because the state parties have power over candidate selection, and that's a very important bit of devolution of power within the party that I definitely want to respect. But of course, it's quite reasonable to expect the federal party to be looking at this and making sure our colleagues in state parties are addressing this. I'm very glad to say we've just recently appointed Alison Sutty to be the federal Joint States Candidates Committee Chair, and I know Alison is very committed to making sure we improve the diversity of our candidates. We made good progress in many respects in terms of the parliamentary party at the last election, but there's still clearly a lot more to do. And I'm also very glad that, in my conversations with people from the English Candidates Committee, they've been really keen to push the boundaries as far as possible within the law to make sure that as many steps and measures can be taken in our selection process. I think the final thing I would say is one of the other elements which we've not yet really given enough attention to is what is the support package around people who get selected as candidates. And that's definitely something that I know Daisy Cooper in her new role as Deputy Leader and Alison in her role in the candidates process, and also Lisa Smart, who is Chair of our Federal Communications and Elections Committee, are all very keen on and have already been having preliminary discussions about. So I hope there will again be more news on that to report soon.
Thank you very much, Mark. I'm going to take a question from Michael Berwick-Gooding. And Michael asks, what is being done to increase transparency of federal committees so that members know what is going on?
I touched on this briefly in my sort of opening comments, but what we are doing now for the Federal Board and for the steering group is before every meeting, a sort of preview piece goes up on the party website, and after each meeting, a report goes up as well. And I think that preview one is particularly important because in a way, you've slightly missed the boat if you hear that a committee has made a decision and you think, oh, I had a view on that. So that's why, I've been very keen on making sure we do those preview reports. We've also expanding the range of federal committees that are doing regular reports after their committee meeting. So you may have seen recently the first of those from our Finance Committee. The Communications and Election Committee has now had a couple of those that have appeared on the website. And I know obviously both the Policy and the Conference Committee have a really good tradition of publishing their own reports in other places, but those are also going to be copied up on the party website as well in future. So you can find all of those different reports in one place. In addition, we're making much more use of things like the monthly email newsletter to members to highlight the bigger, the more important of the decisions that we make at those federal committees. But I'm always open to hearing suggestions on other ways we can improve that transparency.
Thank you, Mark. And we've just got time for one more question. Sorry for the rest of you who put in questions we don't have time for. This one is from Ollie Craven. Would you support federal committees moving to Zoom meetings by default?
Yes, very simply. I can see there's some value in maybe after a set of elections, the first meeting perhaps being in person, because there is a little bit of getting to know other people can help the dynamics of working together successfully as a team. But absolutely, doing stuff via Zoom is better for the environment, better for inclusivity, it's cheaper, and it takes up less time as well. I mean, it is just blissful at the end of a meeting to already be at home. So definitely agree with that. And if I can just quickly add maybe, Duncan, that if anyone didn't get a chance to ask a question or have it pulled out from the chat, by all means, please do email me. The email address is president@libdems.org.uk.
Thanks very much, Mark. We're now moving to the vote on the Federal Board report. We need to either accept it or reject it. So the poll is about to open in the polling tab. So please get ready to vote. Thank you, conference. I can announce the result of that vote. For accepting the report of the Federal Board, 326, and for rejecting 19. So that report is clearly accepted. So we're now moving on to item F25, the report of the Campaign for Gender Balance, and you will find that on page 72 of your reports document. We have no questions submitted in advance, but we are getting some questions in off the chat, so we should have time to take a few of those. But before that, let me introduce Julia Cambridge, Vice Chair of the Campaign for Gender Balance, to move the report. Julia.
Thank you so much, Duncan, and indeed Jenny. So good afternoon, conference. I will be delivering this report on behalf of myself, Anna Sabine, and our chair, Candy Piercy. This year, the work of the Campaign for Gender Balance has been disrupted significantly by the December 2019 general election and by the COVID-19 lockdown. The year after the general election is always quiet, and this year has been no exception. However, the added coronavirus global emergency has put our work on hold for some time. The CGB mentoring team has been guiding a small number of women for approval, especially in the Scottish and Welsh elections. The English Candidates Committee is currently conducting a significant review of its processes, including the approval process. We understand that approvals in England are going ahead, and for the first time, this will be done online. Luckily, our approval mentoring team, which I lead, has always worked remotely. As a result, we'll be able to pick back up and quickly go running very quickly when the new process is in place. But in the meantime, we're helping women to prepare for online assessment days. We're in contact with a number of women, and we're going to be supporting them as we go along. Candidate selections, though, are few and far between. However, we will provide mentors and assist any woman who wants one and who is going to go through to a selection. We anticipate a burst of activity next year when, starting with the key seats, selections will begin. When this happens, we're here to help, support, and mentor women going for selections. At this autumn digital conference, we've been running 4 modules, all very well attended. If you are interested, our final women-only training is happening tonight at 5:40, and that is building your profile ready for selection. One of our flagship training events is the Future Women MP Weekend. And indeed, 4 of our current MPs have been on that weekend in the past. We're working with the diversity team at Lib Dem HQ to work out how we can run this as a digital event, maybe after Christmas, early next year. We'd like to thank all the diversity team for their help since the last conference, and HQ for the immense technical help to deliver our training at this conference. Other news, our chair, Anna Sabine, is leading on CGB, working with the Parliament Project, which is a cross-party initiative, which is also aimed at getting women elected to Parliament. Our work is significantly helped when we are funded, but CGB, like the Racial Diversity Campaign, has not been given any central funding this year. We ask that this is addressed by the party. Away from that, we also raise our own funds, and I'd like to appeal to fellow Lib Dems to donate, to help us put on more events like the Future Women MP weekends. And if you can do that, please get in touch with Candy. So it's sometimes said that the fight is won, and I hear that a lot. The Lib Dems have an impressive percentage of women in Westminster, and we do. And that success was echoed in the fantastic percentage of women MEPs we achieved. But in the 2019 general election, we only had around 33% of women who stood for us. Now, when this is 50% or above, we might be able to pat ourselves on the back. Until then, we need to continue to encourage, support and mentor more women. We've been doing that through the training and mentoring I've outlined in this report and the projects to come in the new year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia. So we have a few questions coming in on the chat. So I'm going to take the first one from Theo Butt-Phillip. And Theo asks, how does the CGB measure success? Does the CGB have data on the percentage of women applying for approval and selection, and what percentage of approved candidates are women? So Julia, would you like to answer that?
Well, it wouldn't be a conference if there wasn't a question from Theo Butt-Phillips, and I appreciate that very much. Do we have data? I think that we know, for instance, I've given a statistic, 33% of women in seats, and we know how many of those were in target seats. But the candidates process is run by the English Party, and I'm afraid that's something that you'll have to take up with them.
Okay, thank you very much, Julia. So I've got two questions here on all women shortlists, so I'll take those together. The first one is from Catherine Bearder. And Catherine writes, in light of the legal decision disallowing waiting for gender balance in the Euro elections, and now we have good representation of women at Westminster, will the all-women shortlist policy have to be re-looked at? And Christina Morgan-Danvers asks, with all-women shortlists now not being possible because of the good gender balance we've achieved in Westminster, what can be done to ensure that we reach gender balance across target seats?
Thank you, Catherine and Christina. Yes, indeed. I mean, my understanding of all women shortlists, which they were passed in York Conference, was that they were time limited. I think it was 2 election cycles, as it were. We're now not having all women shortlists anymore. We didn't have the diversity zipping, as Catherine says, which was reasonably regrettable. But do you know what? We achieved gender balance even without diversity zipping for our Eurolist. What are we going to do, Christina asks. Well, as I said in the report, the fight is not over. Until we have 50% standing for us, which we don't have anywhere near that at the moment, then we've got to keep going on. And what I would say to anybody watching this, no matter what your gender is, you've got to go out and you've got to encourage more females, more women to get involved in politics, to get involved in your local parties, to be part of your executives. That ask can come from anybody. It really and truly can. So please go and encourage women. And if they want to stand, maybe buddy them up with established councillors, for instance, who are always fantastic on leading and advice at a local level. And get in touch with the Campaign for Gender Balance, because nobody will slip through our net. But really, that's my best tip, is please encourage women activists, or in fact, women who haven't joined the party yet, who are in your circle, and show some interest. Just get them involved.
Thank you very much, Julia. So we're now moving to the vote on the report of the Campaign for Gender Balance. You can either accept or reject the report, and the poll is now open on your polling tab. Thank you, Conference. So on the vote on the Campaign for Gender Balance report, to accept the report, 259, and to reject it, 19. So that report is clearly accepted. Now, we are skipping over item F26, as I said before, for the time being, because we need more time for that. There are a whole series of votes involved, and we'll come back to that at about 3:30 after the leader speech. And now going straight on to item F27, our annual motion on membership subscriptions and federal levy. You'll find the text of the motion on page 42 of the agenda. There are no amendments, and indeed there are no cards submitted against, so we're just going to hear the mover of the motion put the case for it, and then we'll move straight to the vote. So let me call to speak in favour of the motion Anthony Harris, Chair of the Federal Finance and Resources Committee. Anthony.
Thanks very much. Good afternoon, Conference. To introduce myself, I'm Anthony Harris, the Chair of the Federal Finance and Resource Committee, the person listed with the Electoral Commission as Registered Treasurer of the Liberal Democrats, and responsible for compliance, oversight, and money out. You all know Mike German, who does a fabulous job as our party treasurer. He's responsible for money in, so please do stay on after this session when he will be encouraging you to understand more about his money in responsibilities. It may seem confusing to have two treasurers in a political party, but Labour also have 2 and 8 deputy treasurers. The Tories have a treasurer, a co-treasurer, a registered treasurer, and a committee for ethics and integrity, which is only appointed on ad hoc basis. Surprised face. Seriously though, the registered treasurer role is statutory, responsible for money out, the federal budget and financial compliance. In fact, I'm the only committee chair with legal responsibility for compliance under the preparer regulations. So if there are any of you treasurers listening, please can you pay special attention to your preparer returns as the legal buck stops firmly with me. The registered treasurer is elected by the federal board and is voluntary and unremunerated. Sad face. Normally, it's a non-executive oversight role, although some of you may recall that I had to do my fair share of unexpected financial oversight when I was first elected to the role in 2018. I now refer you to the financial report and published accounts on pages 36 to 39 of the Federal Committee Reports to Conference. This shows that my financial oversight role is less onerous these days, largely due to the efforts of our financial controller, Fern McClurg at HQ. My compliance oversight role is also eased considerably by Kerry Buist, our new compliance manager, who some of you will have had a chance to meet virtually while you've been at conference. My grateful thanks to them both for the important roles that they perform so amazingly. Moving to motion F27 on page 42 of the agenda, I must explain that the motion you're being asked to support here has nothing to do with the calculation which allocates a share of membership fees to local parties. This motion only deals with the share with the national party membership rates and distribution of funds to the state and the federal parties. The sharing of membership fees with local parties is a separate issue and completely unaffected by this motion. The federal levy calculation covered by this motion came out of a year-long consultation between the English, Scottish, Welsh and federal parties in 2018. Nothing substantial has changed since that time, but of course these things are always kept under review. However, the current proposal is to keep the membership rates and federal levy the same as they were last year. Therefore, I refer you to the motion detail which freezes membership rates at their previous levels, being £72 for the recommended subscription, £12 standard, £6 minimum for those in receipt of state benefits, £6 for those paying through Young Liberals, and a £1 minimum for Young Liberal members in their first 2 years. The federal levy remains at 55%, which will continue to allow us to provide resources for shared tools, services and support set out in the party strategy. Although the recommended subscription rate is £75, the average contribution per member is still only about £30. Membership income is incredibly important to us, so if it has been some time since you considered your membership contribution, then a review in the upwards direction would be considerably appreciated, especially as it might enable for us to offer more support for the CGB and the CRD. Conference. Motion F27 may appear on page 42 of the agenda, but I cannot claim it is the answer to life, the universe, and everything. However, it is an important part of our party governance and administration. Therefore, I thank you for your attention. I beg leave to move motion F27, and I trust that it will receive your approval and your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anthony. We're now moving to a vote on motion F27. You can vote for it or against it, and the vote is now open in your polls tab. Thank you, Conference. They voted in favour of item F27 333, and they voted against 1414. So the motion is very clearly carried. That concludes this part of the session. As I said, we'll be back to deal with item F26 after the leader speech at about 3:30. So just let me thank my aides, Jenny Reagan, John Ball, and stay on the line for the leader speech, the session will start in about 4 or 5 minutes.
Well, good afternoon, conference. It's now just before 10 to 3, and we're about to move on to item F28. I hope you're enjoying conference. I was told just before I came in here that we have had over 20,000 votes cast all the way through our virtual conference thus far. And if you add up all the time spent on our platform by all of our attendees, it would amount to over 5 years in duration. Now, in putting together this online conference for autumn 2020, we wanted to keep as much as possible to how we would normally run a physical event. We wanted seasoned conference goers to know what to expect and to feel at home here. And those who know and love our conference understand that we never move directly to the leader's speech. No, it's customary beforehand for us to hear from our Federal Treasurer, Mike German. And I don't know about you, but I can hear the clatter of virtual buckets.
Hey, hang on a minute. Just before you put the kettle on, can you spare me a few moments, please? Sit back comfortably and I will begin. I'm Mike German, Party Treasurer, and I want to spend a few seconds on winning elections. After all, that's what we're all here for. Very soon, local parties are going to be asked what they need to win. Now, the answer could be anything, from space to put a table around which people can bundle letters, write envelopes, or pack up leaflets, to the latest state-of-the-art printing equipment. But the challenge is to answer this single question: will this put you in the winning position in your election? So we need to find the money to fund these winning election projects. I want to build a match funding pot of cash which will make this happen. So do you think you could help? If so, this is how you can donate. You can donate with credit or debit card. Go to www.libdems.org.uk/appeal and follow the instructions. I repeat that. Go to www.libdems.org.uk/appeal and follow the instructions. And if you wish to donate by text, then please text WIN5, WIN10, or WIN25 to 88008. And that's to donate either £5, £10, or £25. That is WIN5, WIN10, or WIN25. Text to 88008 to donate £5, £10, or £25. And just remember that whatever you can give will make a big difference to our local parties. So thank you very much. Let's nip down to the South Coast and see what one key campaigner needs.
Hello from the Sunshine Coast. My name's Josh Babarindi from Eastbourne, and I've been coordinating some of our coronavirus response campaign here. And as we recover from this virus and continue to fight it, we've got another fight on our hands, a political one. The county council elections next year. Now, the Conservatives currently control that council, despite only running 1 in 5 of the district councils in the area. The Liberal Democrats, as the key anti-Conservative force in this area, have the capacity to wrestle control of the council back from them. But in order to do it, we need to be even more coordinated, even more tactical, and even more shrewd than we've been in the past. We need a county-wide campaign team, a full-time team, that we can employ with your investment. So if you're able to help us, if you're able to help us build that local government base up that we know everything else depends on, you would be doing a great service to Eastbourne, a great service to our region, and a great service to our party. Please, if you can back us, support us today. Thank you very much.
Now that's fantastic. Now let's hear from Scotland. Wendy Chamberlain needs to hold her seat, which she won from the SNP last December. And that was a fantastic win. So let's see what she needs to hold on to her seat.
I'm Wendy Chamberlain and I am the Member of Parliament for North East Fife.
Wonderful. I wonder if you could tell us this. You've had a big challenge in winning your seat from the SNP, a fantastic win. But of course, you've got electoral challenges coming up in front of you. Could you tell us a little bit about what those challenges are?
Yes, Mike, you're right. I was the only person to win a seat from the SNP in December's general election and overcame the most marginal seat in the country. There was a majority of only 2. And although I've got a bigger majority than that, there's lots of work to do for me to hold my seat, but also to face the electoral challenges that are coming. So next year in Scotland, we have the Scottish Parliament elections. And given the constitutional question that still divides in Scotland, those elections are really crucial. And in North East Fife, the majority of my seat is currently held by the Liberal Democrats and by our Scottish leader, Willie Rennie. So we need to do everything we can to make sure that Willie is re-elected for North East Fife. But as well as that in Scotland, we have a more proportional system for voting in the Scottish Parliament elections, and we have list seats. And the Mid-Scotland and Fife list seat, we do really have an opportunity to get an MSP there as well. And so we need to ensure that not only do we work hard in North East Fife, but we work hard across the area. Also important to mention, into 2022, we have our local council elections as well. And we've got a good body of Liberal Democrat councillors in North East Fife, but it would be great to have more.
Thank you, Wendy. Can you, if I was to have the magic wand and I would say to you, right, here's as much money as you want, what one thing would make all the difference to winning both next year and the year after?
Well, Mike, maybe you can see behind me the poster for North East Fife. That is the size of the constituency. So this is a big rural constituency, and we have lots of small communities that it's very difficult for local delivery networks to get out to. So in terms of money that I need, leaflets for us to be able to tailor our message in North East Fife, but also around the wider Mid-Scotland and Fife regional lists. We've got strong areas of support of Liberal Democrats in some areas of the list region, but we need to make sure we can get our message out throughout that to ensure that we get that list candidate elected as well.
And I assume that's not just one leaflet for everybody.
No, absolutely. We want it to be as tailored as possible.
And more than one for every person you're going to contact anyway as well, presumably.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, one of the reasons why I won in December was because we were absolutely ruthless around our data and targeted voters accordingly. And that's what really helped get me over the line.
Thanks, Wendy. A fantastic project. And now let's go to Wales. Let's hear from Rodney Berman from Cardiff. Let's see what's needed to make the Welsh capital Lib Dem again.
Hi, I'm Rodney Berman, and I've been selected as the lead Welsh Liberal Democrat candidate to stand in the South Wales Central region for the Senedd elections next year. Now that region covers Cardiff, where I'm from, but also it goes down to the Vale Glamorgan and up into the South Wales valleys, covering the Rhondda Cynon Taf area. And in fact, in the picture behind me, you can see all 3 counties that make up the region I'm hoping to represent. Now, in order to win that seat back, we're going to have to fight hard. We used to represent it, but sadly, we lost it to UKIP at the last election. But there is a real chance for us to take it back this time as the Welsh Liberal Democrats revive. And that will give us a chance to take a seat back from UKIP and make sure there is a bigger presence for the Welsh Liberal Democrats and hopefully a team that can back Kirsty Williams up in the next Senedd term. And in order to win, we're going to have to get the vote up right across the region. So not just in parts of Cardiff, where we currently have councillors, but also in parts of the region where traditionally we've not been so strong, up in the valleys and also down in the Vale and in various parts of Cardiff where we haven't been doing quite so well in recent years. But I believe we can do that if we fight a vigorous enough campaign. But in order to do that, I am going to need a bit more cash. And one thing that I think could really make a difference would be if we could employ an organiser who could help our team of activists across the region to really deliver the strongest campaign, help in organising things like door knocking, help in organising literature, help in making sure that we have the strongest digital campaign. We need that help in order to make sure that we can get a Welsh Liberal Democrat member for South Wales Central at the next elections. I hope you can help out. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodney. Another great project. Now, before we hear from the north of England, I just wanted to say that the more you give, the bigger will be our pot of cash to match fund projects like these. It is really easy to give, and here's how. You can donate with credit or debit card. Go to www.libdems.org.uk/appeal and follow the instructions. I repeat that, go to www.libdems.org.uk/appeal and follow the instructions. And if you wish to donate by text, then please text WIN5, WIN10 or WIN25 to 88008. And that's to donate either £5, £10 or £25. That is WIN5, WIN10 or WIN25. Text to 88008 to donate £5, £10 or £25. And just remember that whatever you can give will make a big difference to our local parties. So thank you very much. And finally, to the north of England, Laura Gordon from Sheffield. Laura, what's your ask?
My name's Laura Gordon. I was our candidate in Sheffield Hallam in the 2019 general election, where we lost by 712 votes.
Tell me, in the next year, what are you going to win?
So in 2021, we have local elections where we have an incredible opportunity to take Sheffield City Council to no overall control, where we can really start taking back control of this city against our absolutely useless Labour Council. And in Sheffield Hallam, we also have the opportunity to kick out the last Labour councillor in Sheffield Hallam. We hold 14 of the 15 councillors. We'd like to get a full set, and we can do that next year.
And if I were to ask you if you had a magic money tree and you could spend it on anything, what one thing would you want that would help you to win these elections in the next year?
Well, we have a fantastic organiser who's been with us for some time, and he is amazing, but he is also just overwhelmed. And we really have found that in order to be able to operate at the capacity that we want to, we really need a second person to help us, particularly with social media and with member engagement. So if we were able to get that second person in the office to help us mobilise our activists and to help us really cut through on social media, then that would, I think, get us to the winning position that we need to get us over the line, and just those crucial extra wards in May that could make the difference between a Labour-controlled council for another year and an overall controlled council, or even getting to the point where the Liberal Democrats are the largest party.
Now, if you've been inspired by these projects, it's time to make them happen. Without adequate funding, they will not happen. Our supporters and our members are the greatest asset we have, both in speaking and making the voice of liberal democracy heard, but also in providing the financial resources to make it happen. The more you give, then the louder our voice will be, and our electoral success will be greater. So please, dig deep. North, south, east and west, our job is to win elections, and today you can make a vital step in making that happen. Give our new leader the launch pad needed, and then you can sit back, make yourself comfortable and enjoy the main act, and give a real welcome to the new leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Conference. The challenge facing our country has rarely been so great. Families and whole communities fearing for their future in the face of an invisible enemy. It's natural and right that in such troubled times, people look to government for reassurance, help, leadership. Given the enormity of the threat to our country, it's with deep regret and sadness that I must say this government and this Prime Minister have just not risen to this challenge. With unbelievable incompetence this Conservative government is failing our people in one of our darkest hours. If you judge the UK's response to this crisis solely in what the government is doing, it would be easy to despair. But as I travel the country, listening to people, as I hear what they are doing to beat the threat of coronavirus, to support their neighbours, save their businesses, care for their relatives, as they share with me their dreams as well as their worries, as we all witness how NHS staff, carers and key workers have shown amazing resilience in the face of extraordinary challenges, I am far from downhearted. I am inspired. Take Anne and Bob, who own a fish and chip shop in Stockport and put me to work on a lunchtime shift a few weeks ago. They'd been planning to sell the business and enjoy a well-deserved retirement. Then COVID struck. Anne and Bob put retirement on hold to lead their restaurant through the crisis. They put their staff and customers first and worked harder than ever to save the business. They hope they're past the worst now and can pass the business on to their young manager, Jamie, who joined them aged 14 after struggling at school. This amazing couple had nurtured him and feel he is now ready to take over. Jamie and his partner have just moved house. They are expecting their first child. And his enthusiasm for taking the business forward after 13 years working there is uplifting. I hear stories like this from people like Anne and Bob and Jamie in every community I visit. And I am in awe of how hard people are fighting to prevent this disease from stealing their dreams. Coronavirus is causing enormous hardship and forcing all of us to make big changes. But it's also showing the best of the British people. People's resilience, kindness, and hard work make me absolutely sure we can get through this. But it's those qualities, demonstrated every day by people across Britain, that are in sharp contrast to how government ministers have responded to the pandemic. Just look how Boris Johnson refuses to take even the slightest responsibility for the chaos and harm his government has caused. Their failure to get protective gear to frontline workers in hospitals and care homes, not his fault. When Johnson's chief advisor undermined public trust by breaking lockdown with his trips to Durham and Barnard Castle, different rules for him. When Johnson's world-beating test and trace system turns into a shambles, claims instead a huge success. When children's entire futures were thrown into doubt by the summer's results fiasco, blame the civil servants, blame Ofqual, blame the teachers, blame anyone but Boris Johnson. Johnson's hero, Winston Churchill, said that the price of greatness is responsibility. It seems that's a price this Prime Minister isn't willing to pay. When I've listened to people who've lost loved ones to COVID, listened to the bereaved families our Prime Minister refuses even to meet, the public inquiry into the government's handling of COVID that I first called for in April could not be more urgent. And the public inquiry, when it comes, must look into one government failure above all. Ministers' abject failure to protect people in care homes, the elderly people and their carers. From the lack of tests and PPE to the lies about a protective ring around care homes, while people died in horrifying numbers. For this pandemic has reminded everyone of something Liberal Democrats have always understood caring for people's health doesn't stop at the hospital exit or the GP's surgery door. You can only truly protect our NHS if you protect our care homes too. You can only truly speak up for doctors and nurses if, in the same breath, you stand up for carers, for young carers and professional carers, paid and unpaid, in care homes and in people's homes. This is personal for me. You see, I've been a carer for much of my life. First, as a teenager, when I nursed my mum during her long battle against bone cancer. My dad had died when I was 4. My mum was my whole world. So on one level, it was easy caring for mum. I loved her. But it was also incredibly tough. Taking her tumblers of morphine for her agonizing pain before going off to school. Coming home to look after her. Helping her on and off the toilet. Taking life day by day. Because there was nothing else you could do. And at the end, visiting her on a totally unsuitable dementia ward, in my school uniform, alone by her bedside, when she died. I was a carer as a son, and then as a grandson, organising the care for my nana, getting her into a good home, figuring out how we could afford it, trying to make her last few years as comfortable as we could. And now, as a father, as Emily and I care for our son John every day. John is 12. He can't walk by himself. He was 9 when he first managed to say, "Daddy." John needs 24/7 care, and probably always will. And that's my biggest challenge. John will be on this planet long after Emily and I have gone. So we worry. No one can possibly love him like we do, hold him like we hold him. And our fears are shared by so many parents, many not as fortunate as Emily and me. So let me say this to all of you who need care, to all of you who are carers, to the parents of disabled children, to the thousands of young people caring for your mum or your dad. I understand what you're going through. And I promise this: I will be your voice. I will be the voice of the 9 million carers in our country. It's you I'm fighting for. Just like we Liberal Democrats did in government, when we fought to tackle the funding crisis in adult social care. Through the Dilnot Commission and the Care Act, we carefully stitched together a cross-party agreement based on the same values that underpin our NHS. Only to see the Conservatives rip it up as soon as they could. So now, more than 1 million people miss out on the care support they need. With people stranded in hospital, unable to leave as the follow-up care isn't there. With the challenge passed back to the NHS, already struggling for cash. You see, if ministers really care about their NHS. They need to care about care. Cross-party talks on social care, long promised by Boris Johnson, cannot wait any longer. The COVID crisis makes the need to fix social care more urgent, not less. So today, our health and care spokesperson, Munira Wilson, and I have invited the government, the Labour Party, and leading care organisations to begin these talks in earnest and finally make the progress people deserve. And I'm proud that our party is now championing a universal basic income, because by far the largest group to benefit will be carers. I am determined that the Liberal Democrats will lead the way to a more caring society as we emerge from this pandemic. A society that cares for those jobs and businesses that have been stolen by coronavirus. Our economy was unfair enough before this, but we cannot allow the random unfairness of this pandemic to scar people's lives, especially the young. We must stand together, leaving no one behind. Employers in hard-hit sectors must be given more support to prevent many more people losing their jobs. People excluded from the self-employed scheme must be given the help they desperately need. And Liberal Democrats, we must also lead the way to a new economy, one that's fairer and greener, an economy offering real hope and opportunity for everyone. This pandemic has already changed so much. The daily commute, the congested roads, the lunchtime sandwich. Home working may have changed that forever. But as we weigh the positives of home working, more time with the family, more time to care, with the negatives, too much isolation, too many working with too little space. I want us to listen to people, to understand how they want their working lives to be. Conservatives aren't listening. Their answer is all about going back to the office, back to the old ways. I say, let's do the future differently. Start by finding out what people want. We can't let Dominic Cummings in his NASA-style Whitehall mission control plan our future. No, the future must be shaped by people and businesses in every community across the UK. So, as we listen to people, we must listen to people in business. Businesses that create jobs and opportunities for people across the UK. Businesses facing the COVID challenge, the Brexit challenge, the climate challenge. No one else is listening to them, so the Liberal Democrats will. And in partnership with business, let's mould the new economy. So if there's less demand for office space, let's work with businesses to turn those buildings into sustainable, affordable homes to help solve the housing crisis. If there's less demand for air travel, let's switch investment from Heathrow's doomed third runway into green, zero-carbon flight and save jobs in our aerospace sector. If there's less demand for oil and gas, let's work with industry to transition the UK into the world leader in clean energy technologies, from hydrogen for heating to tidal for power. If you listen and work with business, you can build new green industries with thousands of green jobs. I know because I've done it. In government, we Liberal Democrats helped make the UK the world leader in offshore wind. We brought green jobs to the UK's nations and regions. something the Tories said simply wasn't possible. Like the Siemens factory in Hull, where they now produce the incredible 75-metre-long blades for offshore wind turbines. It has created more than 1,000 new jobs in a city that once had the country's highest unemployment. It has breathed new life into a dock long after its original purpose died. Once, ships left Alexandra dock full of coal, be burnt in the dirty power stations of the past. Now, ships leave Alexandra dock carrying wind turbines to be installed in the clean power stations of the future. Liberal Democrats did that by listening to business and in partnership with business. And that's how we can build the new green economy we need. But if we want to change the country's future, we first have to change our party. It's an incredibly humbling thing to be elected leader of the party I joined 30 years ago. I'd like to thank Layla Moran for making the leadership campaign a positive one, full of ideas and energy. And it's a huge privilege to follow in the footsteps of my personal hero, Paddy Ashdown, of the great Charles Kennedy, and of my good friend, the wonderful Jo Swinson. Jo did our party proud. Parliament is so much poorer without her. But Jo leaves a fitting legacy. The first majority of women MPs in our parliamentary party ever. And Jo, I want to follow your lead and make our party the most diverse party in British politics. Because, my friends, we are right to take the knee and support the Black Lives Matter movement. But unless we have more black members, more black councillors, unless we have black Liberal Democrat MPs, can we truly say we are listening to Britain's black communities as they demand a voice? Friends, we need to listen to everyone. I'm proud of everything we stand for as a party and everything we have achieved together. The listening I'm talking about, the listening we need to do, it isn't about changing our values. We will always be a proud Liberal party, defending individuals, nurturing community, protecting civil liberties, championing the environment, patriotic, internationalist, and yes, always pro-European. These values are why I love this party. But we have endured 3 deeply disappointing general elections in 5 tough years. At the national level, at least, too many people think we're out of touch with what they want. We can't fix this with a catchy new slogan or by fighting the same battles in the same way. The answer is to listen to what people are really telling us and to change. We know that people want a better future for themselves and their families. So let's show them that the Liberal Democrats can build that better future, that we will help them get on in life. Let's show that we're a party that understands the worries that keep people up at night, that can deliver on the things that matter most to them. And let's show that we stand for fairness, for the rights of every individual. But to do all this, we can't just talk to ourselves. We can't just speak for people like us. We have to represent the whole country, not just some people. We are not a think tank or a pressure group. We don't exist merely to put forward ideas or espouse a set of principles, however noble they may be. We are a political party. If we want to help people get on and build a fairer, greener, more caring future, we have to win. And that is why, next May, we must get more Liberal Democrats elected to councils across England, to the Assembly in London, to the Senedd in Wales, and crucially, to Parliament in Scotland. Elections often determine the future of our country, but these Scottish elections could well determine if our country has a future. Once again, the forces of nationalism threaten to tear our family of nations apart. So it is imperative that we get brilliant Liberal Democrat MSPs elected to Holyrood in May, to reject more division and instead put forward a positive partnership, to work for Scotland and work for a better United Kingdom. That is why we must change. So people choose positively to elect more Liberal Democrat MPs at the next general election, to kick the Tories out of government and Johnson out of number 10, to restore compassion to our politics and justice to our society, to champion the values of liberty, equality and community, to tackle the climate emergency and build green jobs and opportunity for all. It's only by listening, by rebuilding our connection to people in communities across the UK, by demonstrating that we are on their side, that we do want to help people get on, that we can win those elections and make a real difference to people's lives. Only then can we guarantee Anne and Bob the dignity in retirement they deserve. Only then can we make sure that Jamie's child grows up in a country of genuine opportunity. Only then can we give all disabled children and young carers real hope for the future. That is now the mission before us. So let's get to it. Thank you.